I was just like, okay, what is my role in this crew? And I realized I was like the connector between, you know, these amazing dynamic forces. And like, I was just the person that would help keep the glue together. And, you know, my erg was, I think by the time that I left the training center was like 25 seconds better than when I got there. You know, so in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm just the connector. Like I'm the, you know, the fun one, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, no, I'm the one that's working really, really hard as well. And I'm keeping us like this compact unit together, and also just being like a very positive person that's coming in and just doing the work and trusting the process.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Last Stroke Counts. We've got a very special guest today. We have the current Olympic champion in the women's 4 from Tokyo. Please welcome Rosie Popa to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. So excited.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for getting this room for us as well, in your college, in Oxford, which is where we are now. Very convenient, obviously.
We should give a bit of a shout out, maybe.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for obviously hosting us here. We potentially get one or two others as well. This one's exciting. First, it was exciting. You're the first Australian athlete we've had on podcast, but also you kind of got links to a couple of other top rowing nations as well. So there's a few different things to talk about on that side.
Yeah, and you managed to like really fly under the radar, the fact that you were in Oxford for this entire year. The only reason that we actually found out was that someone bought us a coffee with a comment. I'm not sure if you're interested, but there is a girl. I'm not sure she does a lot of rowing at the minute, but she's called Rosie Popa. She's a current Olympic champ. And instantly I messaged you that morning. I was like, right, let's go.
Yeah, pretty incognito last, I guess, year and a half since being, I guess, retiring from the sport. I think so much of, I will get into it later, but I think over the last few years I've officially retired, but I think it's that identity piece of figuring out who you are outside of Oxford. And I think because I had retired and I didn't have an intention to do the boat race, I kind of didn't want to almost take anyone else's thunder and kind of let the Oxonians and Cambridge have their moment through the boat race, while I was figuring out kind of where sport sits with me now. And it's just such a big identity piece, but it's nice to kind of be back, weaving into the sport community again, because I do really miss it. But I think it's cool to come in as an alumni and no one's tapping me on the shoulder anymore to compete, that I can just be a super fan now.
I was going to say, did they not come after you really hard?
A little bit, but I think what was great was that my decision was really respected, and I did do a little bit at the start of the year when I first got to Oxford, went down and met some of the girls, and I've involved in some sport programs here. That's not just rowing, so really respected. They tried a little bit, but yeah, nothing too bad.
Yeah, we were at the boathouse a couple of weeks ago. We spoke to Alan French. He said it was really cool to have you down.
Oh, that's so nice.
Helping out. Yeah,
lovely people, for sure.
He's a dude, yeah. Cool. Well, then I think the first thing to get into, obviously, is just how you got into rowing, and I think that's kind of bring up maybe the Romanian heritage.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Melbourne, in Australia, and I started rowing in high school. But a bit of background: so my parents both rowed as well. So my mum is American and my dad's Romanian, but they actually both rowed for Australia in 1984, and dad also rowed in 88. So both of them have bronze medals from the 84. Mum was in the women's 4 as well, and then my dad was in the 8. My dad's part of the only Australian men's 8 that's ever won a world championships, and dad also competed in Seoul. So I guess rowing is part of the blood, and both my parents are rowing coaches and really involved in the rowing community in Melbourne, and run the official Learn to Row program in Melbourne. So always been part of it, but I used to be a really avid basketball player when I was younger, and then had a lot of injuries, and I guess just started getting into rowing when I was in high school. But then that led to me rowing in my club at Banks Rowing Club in Melbourne. And then it kind of just went from there, where I was doing the club and the school, and then got a scholarship at Berkeley in California, where I went and did 4 years there. So definitely never did any national team stuff until under 23s.
I was going to say one of the only rowers that's actually come from playing basketball, because everyone gets asked like, "Are you very tall? Do you play basketball?" But you actually did.
Yeah, so I was super tall. Like I was a giant. When I'm nearly 6 foot now, but I was nearly 6 foot when I was 14. So I think mum said, maybe a bit tall for rowing, because I had some projected height of 2 meters tall. So that's actually how I got into basketball, because mum was like, being really, really tall, there can be a stigma of, can stand out, but she wanted to I guess as a young woman to be around other really tall and strong females as well. So it never felt like a burden. It was more of an advantage. So that's kind of why I started, because I was just so huge. And then I stopped growing, and then I wanted to have a go at rowing. And I remember Dad saying, you don't need to do it because we did it. Don't feel the pressure, because rowing is super, super hard. And I was like, no, I want to have a go. And I just fell in love with it. So, and didn't look back. So that was, I think, started when I was 14. Yeah.
Yeah, so no pressure from mum and dad to be like, you have to.
No, never. And that was something that was great that we always talked about, of kind of separating church and state, right? So they never pressured me to do anything with rowing. And it was always coming from a place of support and understanding what it was about. And I think that was kind of the superpower, because when I needed help or just needed parenting, there was never any conflict of interest of me being injured, but my parents thinking that, I needed to keep competing. They really understood that they were seeing me as a daughter who kind of needed to rest, rather than having their own agenda to want to make me succeed and be a really good junior when I needed time to develop and, have a normal childhood when I was playing for 2 different basketball clubs, as well as rowing for school, as well as rowing for my club. So I was super, super busy and just wanting to be a normal kid. So I felt very, very lucky that I never felt pressured by them.
That's good.
That's such a good example, though, to have set by your parents.
Yeah.
Maybe the dad was like, don't feel pressured to start rowing, but in the back of his head, he was like, come on, I know you're going to be very good at this.
I think they finally were relieved of how happy they were. There's video of them watching my race in Tokyo, and they've always kind of kept their cards so close to their chest that they never wanted to put the emotion. But seeing them watching my race is just so incredibly cool, because you could just see how much they were just holding on and had been part of this. I think I rowed for 15, 16 years by the time I retired. And they've seen all the ups and downs. So for them to actually, I don't know, for me, it was crossing the finish line was almost as much for them as it was for me, because I knew how, they'd won the parenting game. They'd just done it so well in terms of being such an amazing support, but also being the rowing mentors of setting amazing example as well throughout my rowing career.
So if you were able to sort of discover the sport and your love for it on your own, what is it that kept you coming back to the boathouse?
It's a really good question. I think it was something that, I don't know, I remember I actually missed out on the games in 2016. So it was something that I thought I always just did, and I was good at it and I could see my improvements, but I don't think I kind of had that understanding initially of going, you can do this to get to that next stage. I was kind of doing it passively and just doing what was around, and getting injured all the time, and almost kind of brute forcing my training instead of being okay, I need to get better at this, and not be as strategic. And I think when I missed out on rowing, the Olympics in 2016, and I was so close to quitting, I was bouncing around, just stomping around saying, yeah, I'm done. And then my mum, she goes, as a female sports person, she's you are too good to quit. And she's you need to just keep going. She's if I didn't think that you were good enough, I would tell you, but she's you are just too good to stop. And she's I see that potential. And I think just kind of having that of someone being they saw the potential when I kind of had lost hope a little bit. And then I really thought about things strategically, of breaking this really big task down, of going, okay, I want to go to the Olympics, not just be okay, I'm going to rock up and just do it. Be okay, well, I want to go to the Olympics, which means I need to make the team in this year, which means that I need to get my ergo down. I actually just broke this really big task into this small, manageable pieces. And I think, because I'm super task oriented, that I'd start seeing incremental improvements. So that was on the practical side of things. But I think the sense of community and the sense of belonging and the sense of just doing something that you're really, really good at and having a collective goal was something that always brought me back. And I've been lucky that I've been in some really, really great team environments. So I think just kind of showing up for your mates and showing up for the people that really inspire you as well was something that kind of kept me back for the kind of more subjective, emotional side of things as well.
Is that task list and goal setting thing, is that something you just worked out by yourself, or is that something someone showed you how to do?
I think when I was younger, because I was so busy, because I was doing so many other things outside of sport.
You're not now.
Pardon?
You're not busy now.
Yeah, now that's what I take and do it now. But I think it's just I think there's something in my brain that really likes tackling something that most people will just look at and be oh my God, that's so overwhelming. and breaking it down and be like, well, all I need to do today is just do that. And I kind of like the analogy of like, I'm in the eye of the storm. Like there's just so much chaos around me, but I'm this like calm person in the middle. Like, I don't know. That's just something that I feel like I can thrive in that environment, which is something a bit strange, but
I was literally telling you basically the same thing the other day. I do the exact same thing. And I think it's funny about, some of these. So a lot of people who don't do that naturally, or like certainly if you talk to psychologists would say like, that's like a really smart way to break things down, make it manageable and stuff. And I think the things that we do naturally, we kind of write off as being like, no, I just do that.
Yeah.
No, that's actually like a really good thing.
Yeah. And I think it's taking that time to reflect. And I think when I got into, journaling and being reflective and talking to other people, I kind of did realize that was my point of difference and something that I can manage when I've got everything sorted and I have a clear plan of what I'm doing, because I think I have a really big capacity to do things that I was taking on so many things initially and not saying no to anything. And then I think as I matured and understand that you have to say no to things and you have to prioritize. And so it was kind of this evolution where I used to have a really big capacity, but used to get really, really anxious because I would do so much stuff instead of going, well, let's just be really targeted and cut back on X, Y, Z and do that really, really well. So you're doing the same amount of effort, but you're doing it like with so much more ease because it makes so much more sense and it's all interrelated. So, I mean, that took me so long to get right. But yeah, I think that's something that rowers can do because it's, it is an offensive sport, right? Like you can't actually do anything to affect anything else, what anyone else is doing. So I think it's the ultimate controlling what you can control, because you can't even control what's happening within your boat. Sometimes if you're in a crew boat or the weather or anything like that. So there's so many different elements. So it's like, how can you just go rigger to rigger? All I'm doing is just focusing on what I'm doing. And how do you create teams or create an environment or a vibe that everyone can really trust what's going on?
Mm-hmm. You just have to play your part to the best of your ability, because you've only got, in the 25% of the entire crew.
Exactly.
And you can't do any more than 25%. No. But if you're not filling up your bucket, then what are your other teammates going to do, etc. So, yeah.
Exactly. And I think it comes back to like one big thing for me was like the communication. I guess my biggest data point is the Tokyo boat, that we really understood each individual role. So we knew, and each 25% was as important as the other, so we really understood exactly what our strengths was, exactly what we needed to work on, exactly what we were doing every single stroke of the way, because the stern pair was also competing in the women's pair as well. So we only had 50% preparation leading into Tokyo in a COVID Olympics as well. So it's like anything that could go wrong or anything that was an obstacle was happening with us. And a typhoon came through the day before our final, which moved the women's pair semi to 2 hours after our final. So it's like literally so many different things going on, but like everything that would come up, we would just go, okay, well, what can we control in this moment? And obviously it's highly emotional, but it's like, how can you just control everything that's just happening and take it on, and having that moment between, stimulus, absorb what information you've had and then respond to it instead of being reactive. So I think that's what we did really well.
Yeah, I heard a good thing in the day. It was like 80% of your problems can be fixed by waiting 20 minutes before you try and solve them. Yeah. Kind of thing. Also, I think like the game within the game to a certain level is like nailing your 25%. And then once you're doing that really, really well, and like it takes a lot to do that. But the next level is then you're kind of going into, well, how can I also get the best from the people around me? I heard a good thing about Kobe, the basketball player, was talking about how one of his teammates said, I want to feel like you need me. And he was like, of course I need you. But it's like, I need to actually go back, like, why does he feel that way? Like, what's his journey? Where's he come from?
Yeah.
And like going, then you start to see this like next level of sport, which is like, I can get the most out of myself by getting the most out of everyone else around me. Yeah,
I think it's a huge like vulnerability piece, which I think is rowers, you want to be really strong and go, well, I know I'm the best person for this job, which you are, but if you're going to row by yourself, you're going to be rowing in circles, right? If you're a sweeper. So I think sculling, and if you're in an individual boat by yourself, that's different, where you're probably depending on your support staff or other people as well. But I think especially a medium-sized boat like a 4, which is so good when it's so good. It's good when it's good, but it can be bad when it's bad, right? Because it's such an awkward number, whereas a pair is kind of, that's a complete marriage, but then this 4 is this weird hybrid, and then an 8 is just a different beast in itself, which I love 8s. But, they're all such different mentalities that you have to go about it. But I think ultimately it comes down to that trust piece with each other and knowing that you're that you're dependent from each other, but also not thinking that's a negative.
Yeah.
How can the same sport and the same movement just feel so different depending on like which different boat you're in?
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
I wanted to find out a little bit about how you get taught how to row in Australia. Do they just throw you in the deep end? Is there like a rule that you need to start sculling instead of sweeping, or
Yeah, I
how
mean,
does it look?
it's very different. So I did have the advantage of, my parents being coaches and kind of knowing the right coaches to put me with my temperament. And so I did start rowing. I was sweeping when I started in high school. And then when I was at Banks, I was under a coach called David Orchard, who's an amazing small boat mover coach. And he's very gentle and soft-mannered and kind of really puts it on the athlete. He would assign task and he would be there for you, but there was an expectation that you would do it. And like, he never yells. He's super gentle. He's a massive technician. So I had this dual kind of learning how to sweep at school, but then my main priority would be rowing with David in a single scull. So that was a really cool experience. So mine was very unconventional. I actually didn't row in 12th grade, which is, I guess, senior or whatever, the fourth form. I'm not sure what it is in the UK. But in the last year of school, I actually didn't row for my high school. I rowed for state and the club. And so I would do sweeping with that. But usually what happens is that you enter in a high school rowing, and then that's like a huge thing in Australia. And then from there, there's pathways to under 18s or under 21s and under 23s from there. So it also depends on what school you go to. There's sweeping programs and sculling programs. So I was lucky enough to do both. And then I was mainly sculling in high school and then went into sweeping when I got to Cal Berkeley.
I was going to say, what was the decision to go to Cal? Was that for rowing?
Yeah, largely. So my parents, they were thinking, you want to be a good senior, not just a good junior. So I never rowed for Aussies in high school or anything.
So you never trialled as a junior?
No, which I really wanted to. And my mum's like, if you want to row, you want to be a good senior. You don't want to burn out.
That's so right there.
Well, it's also really difficult. I think it might be different now, but the seasons are different in Australia. So when you go to junior championships, you're actually missing a lot of high school because it's during our winter. So it's complete opposite. So a lot of really good high school rowers actually do their year 12 over 2 years. And I think that was a decision to make sure that I got through school at an appropriate time. And then at the time when I was coming through under 23s, there was no pipeline for under 23 athletes that are Australian who go to colleges in the States to row for Australia. That didn't exist. So that's why I made the decision to row for the USA when I was there, because it actually fit with the calendar of the NCAA and school. So it would just be on the summer break, which made it so easy because it was really, and I have dual citizenship. So it was, you never want to like turn your back on a nationality, but I have both. And it was a strategic decision that I could like A, get a really amazing education, B, continue rowing while I was finishing off my degree. So when I was a senior, that I had all my studies and all the stuff out of the way, that I wasn't stressing about kind of rushing through the end of my rowing career to get that first job or finish my uni degree. So by the time that I was on the Olympic team or the national team at the senior level, I'd already worked a few years. I had my undergraduate degree. I'd got my certificate 3 and 4 in personal training and done a few other things that I'd had kind of life experiences. So I didn't feel like I had to rush through the last few years, which is when you have to kind of like really focus on rowing. You can't put anything in front of that. Yeah.
That's a massive benefit of having rowing parents.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think, I never got pressured to row or anything, but I had such an amazing advantage that I just didn't have the benefit of that 30, 40 years of being in the rowing community, that that I had really, really smart parents that knew what environment would suit me best. And, there was never a question if I should there was no empty nesting from them. They thought, what an amazing opportunity to go to Cal and row overseas and have that 4 years of, living and meeting amazing new people from all over the world. Like I never had any of those barriers that actually took up any energy, which I think is such an amazing advantage. But then on the flip side of that, just because you have good rowing parents doesn't make you a good rower. Like you can have all the tools, but they're not going to sit there moving the boat. Like, it was still my job to like actually do it.
Well, you got to play your cards to the best of your advantage, and like taking that strategic decision to like row for US whilst you were there because it fit with the calendar better. It's just the obvious choice. I mean, at that point when you started rowing for the US, did you think I need to row for Australia as a senior, or you had no preference?
I didn't even think about it at the time. I knew it was, I think it kind of got to get, I didn't know if I wanted to row after college. I think when I left, I was kind of a bit burnt out when I graduated. And kind of took a year, but I did make the Australian team in 2015. But it was kind of that, just make sure that you're making, once you get to the senior year and go, okay, do I still want to pursue this? Because that would, I didn't look for a job. I came back and made the decision. Yep, I'm ready to kind of go and try to make the Australian team now. So there never really was a, I guess it was just being very present at the time and kind of going with what I was feeling and what I felt prepared to do.
So yeah, process, not outcome driven, like not thinking about the end, taking things a year at a time. So other things, like definitely we've heard from other top performing athletes, like great things to think about.
Which I think was such a mindset shift, like even during that time, like I say that now, but in my day to day, I still probably was kind of chasing that. I wanted to go to the Olympics in Rio and, I was doing everything right, but the way I was training wasn't as smart as it could be, where I was, probably, I was a little bit, I used to be really, really anxious and kind of look over my shoulder a lot of like what everyone else was doing, and not going, okay, I need to focus on getting stronger or getting my erg down and stuff. Like I was a really good boat mover, but my ergo sucked, at the time, or sucked in, it wasn't good enough to like, that was going to be a asterisk on my name that needed to be addressed. And I think before Rio, I was really relying on what I was good at, and I was shying away from what I needed to improve on, which only got me so far, which got me to being injured just before selection trials for Rio. And I think that was a big learning of going, okay, if I'm going to go for Tokyo, I need to really be brave and focus on what I need to get better at now. So I took a really big step back from international rowing and actually just took a year away on that 2016 season and got my head right. And then also just started working on things that I needed to improve on. So I think it's just a constant learning where I don't think if I had actually missed out on Rio, I would have identified that I needed to do that. So it was kind of that really big accountability piece of being like, okay, you can't just rely on the fact that you can win seat races. You have to get your ergo down and you have to get strong enough so you don't keep getting injured. So, I was putting all the pieces in place when I was there, not thinking too far ahead, but I wasn't being strategic enough initially. Whereas when I came back, I was like, no, this is going to be like an absolute military operation. Which worked out really well. And I enjoyed it so much more because it was so much more simple.
You learn so much more from failure.
Oh, yeah. And it sucks at the time. And like anyone listening who's ever missed out on anything, like I feel you, it sucks. But it's one of those things where like you have to really look at yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, what can I do? Like there's probably things that go against you, but what can I do to make sure that like certain things that I could make better, I can actually make better? Because there's going to be like seat races that you miss out on because maybe someone else caught a crab or something like that. But like, what can you actually do to make sure that like a selector's looking at your name on a piece of paper and be like, I can't not put this person in this boat. And that was my omen to myself. I was like, when the Australian selectors look at that, there will be no question in their mind that I deserve a seat in a boat. And it wasn't, will Rosie make a crew? It's like, what boat will Rosie be in? And it's you just take control of your, I guess, career and your destiny so much more when that like mindset comes in.
Do you think when you got injured before such a big event, it kind of put like a timeline on your career? So you started thinking about this, like, okay, I've actually got like a finite amount of time and resource that I can dedicate. So that's why you took the decision to sort of, like you said, run the military operation. Did that change your approach to training or like anything day to day?
Yeah, it definitely, it changed so much for me because like so much of my injury was rib, as like most people get, but it was probably because I wasn't fueling enough when I was younger, and I had such brittle bones because I was just so underweight and I wasn't developing the right muscles. And I think it was such a, it's like a body image thing. It's a self-worth thing. It's a like feeling like you deserve, like happiness and to be wealthy. Like it's so much more than actually rowing, right? And I think it was such a personal development growth thing that like the outcome was constantly getting injured. And it probably was like something that, I would fall back on and be like, oh, well, I could have made the boat but I just got injured. So I'd be like, no, I'm going to put I'm going to kind of shut that door on that self-deprecating piece and come back and be like, I absolutely deserve this. I'm going to do everything in my power to do it, which means that I need to put on weight, which means that I need to put on muscle, which means I need to sleep more, which means I need to like get my head right. You know, it was such a domino effect of, initially I thought it was like, hey, you just need to get strong in the gym, but I actually realized it was so much more of the mentality and the approach to training.
So mentally,
I hadn't broken it down again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So mentally, how did you make that first step, like actually deciding to get better before you did get better?
So it was really interesting that I missed out on 2016, and then I did like some traveling, and especially when the Rio Games was on, like I was in Chile working on a lemon farm and working in a hostel and just doing like really weird things.
That's epic.
Yeah, and like had no phone reception, and I just I really wished the people who were on the team well. But I didn't want to, I wasn't mentally prepared to watch the games because I was still hurting so bad. But I kind of knew, I had mates that were in the 8 and, I was in that boat with them. 6 of them were in the boat with me in 2015. And I didn't want them, I don't want to almost be hanging around to be like that sour, influence when they, they got called up a week before the games because the Russians were done for doping the women's 8. So they had 10 days to get ready for the Olympics. And it's that's a whole other thing for them as well, to have someone who was spiteful. Not that I was spiteful, but I was just really hurting. So I took time away, and then one of my mates who was in the Rio 8, Alex Hagen, me and her went and did Henley in the pair in 2017. So we kind of just made fun of, we just made it really fun. So we did women's Henley and we did Henley, and kind of got my love for the sport just then. And it wasn't, we knew we were not going to win the pair in Henley. So it's so funny because that was the first year that Henley had a women's pair event, and we were the first round of the women's pair. So we were the first ever women's pair to get knocked out of that event. And then I came back in 2018 to Henley, and we got a course record and broke the record on the women's 8, the next year. So I was my 2 Henley experiences have been being not, made history in complete different ways. But to go back to 2017, I just got really involved with my club and just had a really great time at Banks. It was a really cool vibe. Nick Mitchell, who was the coach at the time, just created this amazing atmosphere. And he was really cool with me of, dipping in and out when I wanted to. And I just ended up coming back because I just enjoyed the feeling of being part of something so much. And then when we got back from Henley, I started working with the Victorian Institute of Sport and did a lot of physiological testing, and worked really well with them because they kind of identified that I was really, really anaerobic. So I'm super explosive, and I can tolerate so much lactate and pain and everything. My body just works at that high capacity, which was probably learnt from the 4 years at Cal where it's all high intensity, but I was missing that really big aerobic base. So we just worked strategically of going, okay, well, you're going to just do things to prop up this base, which will pull your anaerobic capacity so much further up. So I actually came up with a plan, and it wasn't okay, Rosie, how do we make you a good rower? It was you have the raw materials, but you just need to work on this thing, which is just boring base cardio. And you're going to, have a personalized training program. So I actually started working, was doing that and just following this training program that was catered to me. And then I made, the Women's National Training Centre, which is a training base in Penrith in New South Wales, which is about an hour west of Sydney. So that by that point, the Australian system had turned to a centralised training centre. So I made that. And it was just kind of a snowball effect where I, firstly started getting a plan, and then I went to the training centre and then started working with the coach and be okay, this is my plan. And this is when we're doing, an hour and a half ergos, this is why my splits will be worse because I am working on this and being really transparent. But I was well, I'll crush it at the high intensity and I will win my seat rate. But we just created a really good working relationship. And then from there, I started seeing results. And then from there started being a top performer in the 2x30s or 3x, it's just kind of being patient and letting it happen. And then I think it was, I trusted my abilities, and the coaches were trusting that I was, being really consistent. So from there, and then it was, had a very robust thing. So by the end of the year and a half, it was just making small technical changes and not getting injured and stuff like that. So
how did you cope with in terms of boredom of endless UT2s?
Well, you're doing it with a group of 25 people, like when it's just like this collective mentality, right? Where we were all doing it for each other. And I think that we just understood that that's just what needed to be done. And I think because I understood those plans, like you obviously, it's not fun when you're in it, but like when everyone's doing it together, like it is this infectious thing and it is creating that energy of like you're all in it together. And I think that's something that, the coaching staff created that was really positive at the training center when I was there was we were all doing it together and no one was, what I loved about it was like, just because you're a top performer doesn't mean you don't need to do it. Like everyone was expected to do it and everyone got seat raced and everyone was held accountable, which I think created from my perspective, I think that made me trust and see everyone doing the work. Mm-hmm. And obviously some people are going to be seat raced more than others because they need to do X, Y, Z. But I think there was just like an honesty system, that I really adopted when I was there.
You're not just pulling for yourself, but for those around you and during those sessions as well.
Totally.
It sounds like a bit of a stark contrast to what's happened like a few years later when you were training for the other big event. But before we get into that, how did you see visibly like the performance improvements from when you have adopted that aerobic base to then sort of like supplement your explosiveness? Did you see anything immediate or?
I think it took, so I came into the training center in end of 2017. And I think in that first year, I improved on my 2K by like 5 or 6 seconds. And I was the only change out of the 2017 women's 4 crew that won the world championships the year before. Like I raced my way into a world championship crew after taking 2 years off. So it's like, you're seeing tangible results. And I think the way that the training center is constructed is that you kind of test it every single day. So I could see, when I first got to the training center, I was getting put with like the lightweight women's quad who needed an extra seat. I was like hanging out the side of the boat because I was, 20 kilos heavier than everyone else. But it was funny that I didn't even think, I'm the bottom of the boat. I was like, no, like someone needs to be, and I'm just going to make this boat go fast. Mm-hmm. And then I was in the mix of like the bottom rotation for the pairs. And then I was in the top rotation for the pairs. And then I was matched with the top stroke siders and we started winning. It's like, and then I thought, well, my goal is that in every race and every training thing, I want to be on the podium. Like I want to be top 3 every time. And then I would be top 2 every time, and it's like, so I was like, I set my own standards of being like, I don't ever want to be at the bottom. Like I want to be the person at the top. And I don't care who I'm put in a pair with. I don't care who I'm put in a pote with. We want to go the fastest. And that like, I didn't ever think like, why am I with that person? I was like, okay, well, I'm with this person who came 5th last time in the pair rotation. We're going to come 4th or we're going to come 3rd. So it was like just doing the best with the resources that you have, which made it so much more fun.
It's really awesome to hear. Like everything you're talking about, it's like, if I was to give anyone advice, not that but it just is like exactly right. Like still sticking to the processes, not worrying about what's going on above you, keeping in control of yourself, and like the extreme ownership thing. And I think that's something that we all know and we all think we should be doing really a lot. But like you said, it's so easy to be like, oh God, this person came last time. And there's something even with the podcast, there's a couple of athletes we've had on where I've really noticed, maybe like obviously British athletes, I know a bit more about their career. I might talk about things that I knew that went wrong, finals that went wrong, this or that. And just time and again, there was never any blame on anyone else. Just constantly, it was just like, no, it was me, it was this. And I think it's, even though we know these are the things we're supposed to be doing, like being able to do them consistently is really difficult.
Yeah, well, it's not like sexy, is it? To like just be consistent, it's just like, it's boring. It's like, I think I read this thing once, it's like, what really good people that are like really high performers do is the fact that they just do the basics better than anyone else and they just do the boring stuff consistently. And I think that that's the stuff that like in business, in anything, it's just about doing the 101s better than anyone else. Because like if you look at the rowing stroke, you're literally doing the same thing over and over again. Like you are tasked to not stick out. And I think that like it's an ego thing where like, okay, I'm the best conformer here, but it's like, if to get anything going, like functioning well, you just have to do things, the basics better than anybody else. Which I think was kind of my role in the women's 4, that I was like I tried to be the really consistent person. And, the girls in the pair, the stern pair, like they were this amazing, well, they're still the pair that's going to be competing in in Paris this year. and they are an amazing, amazing combination. And I love them to bits. So they're two of my best friends in the whole world. But they are the super pair. Like they are the ones that, they're in a boat with them and it will go really, really fast. And they are just magic. And then Lucy, who was in the bow seat, was a 2-time world champion before, and she's absolute racer and she's dynamite. And she was a 2-time world champion. And I kind of came in, I was like, hey, I'm like, was kind of off the radar. Like this is my whole, like even what I was saying about Oxford, no one knew that I was an Olympic champion until like, a month ago. But that was very strategic because I was like, I'm just going to do me and I want people to know who I am before they put this label on me. But I was just like, okay, what is my role in this crew? And I realized I was like the connector between, these amazing dynamic forces. And like, I was just the person that would help keep the glue together. And, my erg was, I think by the time that I left the training center was like 25 seconds better than when I got there. So in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm just the connector. Like I'm the, the fun one, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, no, I'm the one that's working really, really hard as well. And I'm keeping us like this compact unit together, and also just being like a very positive person that's coming in and just doing the work and trusting the process. And when we need to split into pairs half of the time, we're going to be cool with that. And there were times where like it could be frustrating that we were sitting in a pair in the middle of Australian winter when we're about to race in Tokyo in a month, and being frustrated that I couldn't focus on my 4. But our goal was 2 fast pairs make a fast 4, and it was like kind of just the self-checking piece, and our coach did a good job. I remember once we had like a simulation regatta and I was just really, really tired and we didn't do that well. And like a pair race that Lucy and I had, and our coach pulled us up and he said, we promised that we would not have, like, we knew what the task was. And if there is an issue, you have to talk about it. But it was just like, a release of emotion, but we addressed it straight away. And then we moved on and then we kicked ass in the 4, so it was like that accountability piece. And I think that was in terms of roles, everyone, coach, staff, everyone understanding their roles just makes like, the projects, a lot more simple. And
yeah, that's really cool again to hear you say, like, understanding your roles is also like a different way of saying not focusing on what you're not.
Exactly.
Like, when we spoke to Martin Cross, again, he was sort of like maybe in 84, like sort of last man in the 4. He very much had this like opinion of 3 Olympians that are supposed to be here. And I'm just kind of, I'm this second, he like referred to himself as like a second tier type rower. I thought this sort of found myself in the boat. And I think that was really difficult for him, and that made him maybe race in a different way. He said maybe he had had things that he would change if he went back. But yeah, to sit with some of the best rowers you think exist on the planet and world champions and not be like, I'm not this. Be like, no, I'm this and this is what I bring.
Yeah, what a privilege. I mean, it's like, I remember having this moment of being like, well, why not me? Why can't I be in this sport? Like, I have performed and I have beaten people and I know that I'm the right person for this job, and kind of it's just such a small mindset shift of like, why me to why not me?
Yeah.
And it's like, even I remember thinking like, I'm just going to almost like when I first got back to rowing in 2017 and be like, well, I need to do things differently now. And it was being like, okay, well, I used to not have much confidence and I used to have a lot of like self-doubt, and who wants to row with that person? Like if you go in and you're confident and you bring people up with you and you make it exciting, you make people want to go really, really hard with you. Like that's so much more powerful than being like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. But it's like, there would be when I was testing kind of my capacity and I would absolutely blow up in the middle of a piece because I'd just gone out way too hard. And you'd laugh it off instead of being like, well, that's what training's for. And then the next time you blow up 10 seconds later and then all of a sudden you're lasting the whole race at amazing capacity. But it's like such a mindset shift, and you kind of release the guardrails of what's possible. And I think that's like when I first got back to the training center, and when I first got there, I was like, well, why can't I make the women's 4? Like, okay, well, like if I miss out on that, no one's going to laugh at me and be like, oh, like Rosie tried to make the top crew. Like, why shouldn't everyone be striving for that? So it's just these little mindset shifts that I think end up like real enabling you to do things that you didn't know that you were capable of doing before.
Yeah, I think a lot of us sit with like, I want to reach my maximum potential, but like never fail on the path there. And it's not possible.
But I think also it's really scary to put yourself out there and then fail. And I think that from my previous experience, I think pre-Rio, maybe I was too afraid to really put myself out there because then I didn't have a reason if I didn't get in, if that makes sense. And I think like my mentality in Tokyo was like, well, I'm going to go 100%. And then regardless of the result, I'm just going to be really proud of myself. And then there was a win. You know, I was like, well, I'm just going to do what I can and I'm not going to get in my own way. So that was like such a stark contrast in 4 years' time.
I love that attitude. And you're so right about what kind of teammates you want to have. You want someone that's got that just contagious positivity and that like just spread to everyone around you. And then also just not dwelling on your failures and just be literally just what you said. Like that's what training's for. I think so many people could learn from that and just sometimes actually be serious about what's important, which is the end of the 4-year cycle, the Olympics, and not like, okay, we need to do 102% in this next piece, etc.
Yeah, we had this really cool thing. It was like you step up. So you don't step up in competition, you fall back on your training. And I think that is the best thing ever. Because like if you're trying to do a PB on race day, that's so much more daunting and be like, well, I've done this in race day. Like I know that I'm capable of that. And even if you don't get it, like there's just so many other factors. So yeah, I think that there's just such different mindset shifts, but it's really kind of going there and putting yourself out there in training, seeing what you're made of and what you need to do, because I think that's what it's there for. And kind of, it's like this little sandbox experience of being like, it's okay to make mistakes. And I think that comes with, you know, from coaching as well. Like whenever I've done coaching, that you create a safe space that people can make mistakes or, you know, not reach certain benchmarks, but as long as they're learning from that, that should be celebrated as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also like really interesting what you said. Like actually you don't want your athletes to go to a competition and try to do something that they've never done before, because again, you don't practice things to get them right once. You practice until you can't get stuff wrong anymore.
Exactly.
And that's what like separates the elite. And for example, in other sports too, like the best basketball players aren't the ones who can do like the best tricks is just a few times. It's those ones who have the basics so engraved in their blood and like in their second nature that it's so impossible for them to get it wrong. They just can't help but get it right?
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's kind of, it stands out with sort of, I find it funny when people, whatever, basketball player hitting the same shot 15 times in a row or a rower doing a certain speed and seeing people be like, how can you do that? That's impossible. And it's like, yeah, because you can't even sort of imagine the work that would be required and the years that it takes in order to achieve that consistency.
Totally.
And I think that's it. There's some people just, especially, I mean, I don't know if it's changed, but obviously we sort of live more in an instant gratification world now, social media, all those things. Like the idea of putting 10, 15 years of work into something is to a lot of people very daunting. I think they want to do it for 3 weeks and be good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally. And I think you are completely right. And I think that, like, I look back now and I'm gobsmacked with what I was capable of doing. Like, I got on the erg the other day. We had this, like, NBA tournament against some other business schools, and I was part of the rowing ergo team, and we had 500s, and I was, like, sitting at splits that I could hold easily for, 3-4K before, and I was dying. But I was like, oh, well, it's like I'm not doing any work. Like, but I was like, it just made me so proud of my, self 3 years ago. Like, well, I'm not prepared to do 8 hours of training a day, so why am I expecting that I'm going to sit on those numbers anymore? And I think that it comes back to like, it being doing the basics really well and just being prepared to do the work and knowing that it's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah, it's something that I found as well. Like in later life, I found a lot of people I know saying a bit, oh, I really want a car, or I really want to go on this holiday, or I really would like to do this. And I kind of have this process in my head now where I'm going to go back and be like, okay, well, if I did want to get that car, then I would need to save this much up for this long. And that means I'd have to not do this and not do that and not go out. But I like going out sometimes. I like doing that. And I probably like those things more than that car. So I don't really want that car anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't sit there for months going, oh, I wish I could.
Exactly.
It's kind of like quickly go through this process and then find out what you actually would really want to do and just kind of go for that.
Yeah. I think rowing, there's such a sentiment of like, I'm sacrificing my life to do this. And I think we were chatting before. It was like, and I put it on my Instagram the other day of, you feel like you're catching up for lost time after. But I think it's like, no, you're actually just making choices that are like context appropriate. We're like at that time doing 8 hours of training a day and living at a training center and exercising, 6 days a week and not doing much else was context appropriate. And now I want to do other things and spend that much of time, if not more, on something else that I'm really, really passionate about. So doing 8 hours a day of training right now without a clear doesn't make any sense right now. So, I'm just applying this, I think like we kind of need to eliminate that like sacrifice sentiment that people associate to rowing. It's like, no, like I'm doing this because I want to achieve this certain goal, and being unapologetic about it, and also creating a lifestyle that like, I say that, but then, I've missed weddings and I missed funerals and I missed all these like really big moment events, but I made that choice at that time, and it makes me sad that I was not able to make those things. But that was a conscious decision, and I can't change that now. And if I would, now I will not miss those things. I will not miss, that's something that at that time I was like, that sucks to miss it, but I made that choice and I own that choice. And now I will never miss those things again because they're really, really special events. So it's like, I think as context change, understanding like the choices that you need to make need to shift as well.
Yeah. I also think that you can kind of get stuck thinking like, oh, I'm the only one missing everything.
Exactly.
And it's like people have jobs where they're away and you can't always change it. Like, You're not the only person that's missed a wedding.
No, exactly.
So
you can't go, like even now I'm missing one in a couple of weeks because I'm here.
Yeah.
And I'm doing my MBA, and now I'm doing this. That's a very short, amazing opportunity. And I will, but I'll make the ones that I can make. And, you just have to just navigate it through, and not beat yourself up about it when you do make that decision, because once you've done it, like, then it's just a wasted energy after if you can't change anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a rowing legend on the show like last year, Alex Partridge, and he said like, I never really looked at rowing as a sacrifice and all that training as sacrifice. It was just what was required to achieve what I want the most.
Yeah.
So made it easy.
Yeah, totally. I think when you're in it, you think that it's something that you're going to do for the rest of your life. But I mean, I stopped rowing when I was 29, so I still have touch wood, but like a lot of years to go, and that was the first, 30 years of my life. And now I'm on to this next phase, whatever that ends up being.
I was going to say, we need to delve into Tokyo a little bit more. I mean, on that point, going into the games, did you know that would be your last year of rowing, or were you kind of leaving it open?
No, I knew it. I think I went with the mindset of, I'm going to throw everything at this, and come to the end of Tokyo, I think that if I've done everything that I want to do and really push the limits and like executed as well as I can, then I will be happy to leave. I did take a year to kind of understand that was the decision to be made, but I mean, that was 3 years when I first went, and then a big 4 years with the COVID delay. But I think at the back of my mind, I knew that I was going to squeeze everything that I could into that time. But it doesn't make it any less difficult. But when I was in it, I never thought I'm retiring after this. Like I'm like leading to this trial. I was like, I'm going to get to that point. If I go around again, that will be a surprise. Like obviously I still want to do it, but like I lived with it, by the time I got to that finish line, or if I didn't make it or whatever, that I had given it my all. And I had left no stone unturned. So I feel very lucky that I was able to make the decision, having a really amazing result, and it wasn't due to, and I kind of left when I still loved it. Like I didn't leave when I hated the sport. And I think I still loved it, but it was kind of, I needed a cooling off period, which is why I've, really stepped away from it for so long, because I think, I didn't want to just get sucked back into it, because that's something that I'd always done. And I think also like you do need to really refresh the way you go about it. Like your routines change and what you prioritize change and everything. So I completely almost divorced it for nearly, 2 years. And then, coming back in whatever capacity it is. And I don't see myself really rowing for pleasure or anything like that. But I think like I would love to be just a very amazing support network to people, and knowing that like it is really hard to get it done, but the possibility of getting it done, and maybe just be a role model of like, now how do we have this bundle of amazing skills and we just kind of transfer it to the other period of time in our life. But that doesn't mean that rowing's not part of your life anymore, because, with my parents rowing and something that's really been my identity for so long, that is part of my identity, but it's not my whole identity. So that's what I'm still figuring out. I don't know what that means. But, I'm at a point now where I will be able to watch the Paris Games and know for certain that I would not make any of those boats go faster, because I am not fit, and I'm not, but it's like, I wish every single athlete in any single sport the world. And I just want to be like a really good alum. That's kind of where I'm sitting now with sport, not just rowing, but with all sports. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Was the postponement of the games hard to accept mentally, is seeing that you're going to have to train at the boundary level for like another year potentially?
Yeah, so I guess a bit of background. So we were actually selected, I was selected in the women's for 2 weeks before the postponement was announced, but the boat was like 50% different to the boat that ended up being for Tokyo. So we were like heard rumblings of COVID or whatever this virus was. And then after a first session, I remember I was in a pair, with one of the athletes, and we got told, like, when we were just docking, okay, instead of weights as our second session at 11, like the high performance director is going to talk to us. And we're like, And the girl, she was in the bow seat, and she's like, I think that this is the day that the Olympics gets postponed. I was like, how can that possibly be? Like, who postpones the Olympics?
But still in Australia at the time.
Yeah, was in Penrith, and then we were on like a conference call with the men's centre, which was in Canberra, and we're obviously in Penrith, and the guy was like, we don't know what's going on, but as we stand, like, the Olympics is either going to be delayed or cancelled, but with COVID restrictions in Australia, this is now a gymnasium that is under COVID restriction, and you actually can't be in this building anymore, so you have to go home, and we don't know how long you're going to go home for. And just like leave, like we are sorry, but we can't actually do anything about this. But they were very good with, as much information as they could. So packed up my bags and drove back, and then set up a marquee in my parents' backyard and got all my gym equipment and weights and ergos and watt bike, and then trained out of my parents' backyard until September. So it was March until September. And then we got back to the training center and then resumed and had to do reselection all over again. And that's when the boat actually ended up being 50% different. So Jess and Annabelle were meant to only do the pair and for the first Olympics, the first Tokyo, and then we ended up making the decision for them to do the double up for the second round. And the two other girls so Lucy and myself were going to be in the 4 with 2 other girls, and then the 2 other girls ended up being in the 8, and then Annabelle and Jess ended up coming and doing the double up as well. So it's just a bit of a rejig. And then 2 of the girls that were in the 8 actually got deselected. So it was just like such a mess. But you can just do it. So I'm not sure what your question was, but yeah, it sucked. But but it was super character building. Like, I think in terms of knowing what you're capable of, and like going back to breaking a really daunting task down, like we had a kind of a 30-minute rate 20 erg every month. And my goal for that was just every 30-minute get better, because I didn't row for 6 months because we couldn't get on the water. So that was my benchmark of like, just get fitter and stronger and just make that 30-minute ergo better, which is just wild when you think about it now. But, we would do Zoom ergs and we do Zoom weights, and we do, you kind of all siloed. And Jess Morrison, who was the 3 seat, who's the bow seat of the pair for Australia now, so COVID in Australia, we had restrictions that you couldn't go outside of a 5K radius. And me and Jess lived like 4.8 kilometers away from each other. And which is crazy because we're both bow siders, but we're the only person that we could train with. Yeah. And she and I were kind of ranked 1 and 2 on bow side. And it was like this beautiful thing where we not only really, really good mates, but like we were in direct competition with each other. But we just thought, instead of going, we're going to like outbeat each other, we just would be like, well, let's be the 2 best bow siders in the world, and like, how cool is that? Like, you're just training with your best mate to be like 2 like best bow siders. And then, I remember thinking like, she's the only person in the whole world that I would want to be like lose a seat race to, because I know how like I would be okay with to lose a seat race too. Like, I hate losing, but like I would be okay because I know that she is an absolute weapon, and I want her in my boat. I do not want to be racing against her because she is an absolute weapon. And like, to actually have that much respect for a competitor. I think from that COVID experience, we created this like, because we were in a tandem as well in the 4, and we just created this like really amazing dynamic that we were just in it for the right reasons. And I think that and the other 2 girls, the stroke siders, were, they wanted to be the best stroke siders in the world, and it wasn't like we had this friendly competition, but then we also wanted to be really good role models to the rest of the women's squad that like, no, we are going to try to be the best in the world, but we also want to be good teammates. So it was like, it's like so amazing looking back now and like actually, doing my like MBA and learning like the actual frameworks and concepts of how to do good teamwork and create good culture and healthy work environments. But that's what we were doing, but we just weren't putting names on it. So it's like,
that's funny.
Yeah, it's really, really sick. So that was, you know, as hard as it was, I think that like that period of time during COVID, just like knowing that would be harder than the actual race itself. And that's what it felt like. I remember thinking, I'm going to make this as uncomfortable and like, I would just, you know, do ergos for like 2 hours without music, or I would do something like super psycho that was like just so crap, but being like, well, that means when I'm racing 2 kilometers, that's going to feel so easy. You know, so it's like kind of keeping that like stress stimulus, which I think is really important, and not shying away from like being really, really uncomfortable and like still showing up and being consistent.
I'm in awe of what you're saying. And also, like, how did you...
unhinged now, I think about like, that's so psycho. No, it's funny.
But it's funny. You said that. I don't remember what your question was, and then you've answered my 2 questions I was going to ask after that already, because I was going to ask about team bonding.
Oh,
and, like,
yeah.
Any mental tricks that you played with yourself. That's
I definitely think you should do some athlete rep stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
You're saying all the right things. It's funny, I did the same thing. I do a bit of sort of coaching, sort of on the mental aspect with a few young rowers. And my brother's partner basically studied that, has done the actual work. And it's funny, I'll talk to her about this process I do, whatever, and she's like, oh, that's called this. Yeah. Like what you're doing is this, is this. And it's really cool actually to like link that up.
Yeah.
But like there's so many channels of information you can kind of just get this stuff in. Like for me, even Instagram now, like so much of like, there's so many sort of mental little bits and pieces.
Totally.
There's a little crap you have to get through.
So much.
There's also like, there's so many little bits you can pick out.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot out there. I think we're kind of at a point now where like there's so much stuff, and I've never had a social media presence or anything, like even when I was racing, like just kind of didn't do anything with it. And now I'm kind of going, well, I have this platform, and I don't know, I don't want to be an influencer, but I want to be a positive role model that like putting content out that isn't just, I don't know, photos of sunsets or, you know, like, I don't know, but like I now in the last few weeks ago, like I want to put out like my learnings from it. It's almost like this therapeutic thing of putting, like we were just saying, these actions into like tangible words that I'm like, oh no, this is what I was actually doing, which has almost been this really cool, I guess, ownership of what I've done as well. And I think like I've had such positive responses of, you know, it's only been a few weeks of, you know, put up a bit of video, put a bit of like what you're saying, but realizing that is actually quite different, that a lot of people don't think like that. But the cool thing about that is not that I'm a super scroller, but my algorithm of everything is so much more positive now. Like it's not just like, you know, stuff. It's actually about these things that are really positive. So I'm like, oh, what you kind of put out. It's like this thing of, you know, I'm receiving all these things and I'm like, oh, that's really cool to hear. I didn't think of it like that. So it's like there's so much active learning as well. And I think that's kind of controlling your own narrative and taking ownership of that, like even though it's social media. But I think I used to think of it as such a big distractor, but now I'm like, it's actually can be quite positive, and you can set a really cool tone if you make that decision to do so. So I'm trying to really construct this, I guess, almost this thought leadership of being like, okay, well, I'm, you know, this ex-athlete, but I'm also a student at business school, and I'm also love going out, and I also love hanging out with my friends, and I also love traveling. And like, you know, I'm not this squeaky clean person that's perfect. And, you know, I was a good rower and now I'm just something else. But I'm like, no, I'm this like plethora of different things, and this is kind of me. So it's like, you know, not oversharing all my personal experience, but actually going, no, this is who I am, and I like to do a lot of different things. And I think like that balance piece and just showing a realistic view of the challenges of rowing, but also like the after of beyond is really amazing too. So
that's a weird thing, isn't it? When you start talking, I remember having a hilarious conversation with a bunch of rowers, sort of talking about like post-career. I was like, well, I used to play basketball. I think I'm going to play basketball when
exactly.
I'm definitely going to go cycling. Like, I really want to travel. And just thinking about that you can be more than one thing, which is quite daunting, but also cool. It's also awesome to hear like what you've done through COVID. And again, like having speaking to a lot of high performers, not just for rowing, just in general, having realized that there's quite a difference between two groups of people, like the ones who are like, this is horrific. How can I make the best out of it? So in the British team, obviously, you know, a lot of indoor training and stuff, there's a lot of people breaking, there's some world records, I think you've got broken, records, personal bests and stuff. And just, you know, okay, well, I know I need to get stronger, so I'll get hold of some weight equipment, and like what can you do? Very instantly, just sidestep the emotion, actually, how can I use this to my advantage?
Yeah.
As opposed to some other people like, oh, this is an absolute nightmare. I can't do anything, just sort of moping around. And like you said, that perspective shift like makes such a difference.
Yeah.
I definitely felt like a lot of motivation from hearing, like, because I have rowed, I know the experience of rowing from you at a high level, but I never had to deal with that. Like that's for me, it was such a completely different thing.
Yeah.
I think it's really motivating to hear people, even in the worst situations, how can we improve on this?
And it's like, it's interesting now because I think it's shifting into such a different, like my lifestyle is so different now, but you know, it's going to take a few years because you're completely institutionalized as well, which you have to be, you know, that like going back to context, you have to buy into it. And then all of a sudden you like come out of the Truman Show and you're like, what? I don't need to tell people where I am. You know, it's like this complete rebirth of everything that you've ever known. And then like, you know, I feel like I've learned all these lessons in COVID and throughout my experience, but I'm still kind of figuring out where that fits. And like, I get triggered by certain things. Like the other day I was in Paris and then walking through and seeing all the really cool, like it's going to be an amazing Olympics. And I had this like initial visceral reaction. I was like, I was jealous that I didn't get the Olympics that had the spectacle where you got the parades and stuff after. And I was like, that's an interesting emotion. And I kind of just like let that wash over me instead of being spiteful. But I was like, oh, well, why do you want the spectacle? That's probably for external approval. Like you got the best possible result. Like you are undefeated at the Olympic Games. Like, but it's actually those things like, oh, I got triggered. Interesting. That's because I didn't, you know, and it's like unpicking that where it's like, I think the way I'm viewing this transition period is like just observing these things that come up and be like, oh, that's triggering. I wonder why that is. And, you know, for nearly 2 years, I didn't do any sport or physical activity with anybody else because or like my Garmin, when I went for a run, I wouldn't put it on distance. I would just do it on time because I didn't want to be measured. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm actually okay to get a Strava now and I'm okay to like share, you know, and be in like a team dynamic and stuff again. So it's like, that's taken, you know, nearly 3 years, but actually being okay to like unlearn so much and then put everything on the table and then kind of pick up the pieces. So I think no matter how well or like how, you know, positive or negative your rowing career finished, I think it is that like observation piece of going, okay, why am I responding to certain things? And usually it is something that's a deep ingrained trauma or something, but it's actually like facing it straight away rather than pushing it away because you have to deal with it at some point. So I definitely get triggered by certain things every now and then, or, you know, push myself in that, or, you know, try to micromanage different things. But, you know, instead of it lasting a month, it lasts for a minute, you know, but it being right on top of it and not letting it fester into something that's really negative.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the times I struggled most in my career is I sort of found myself trying to achieve things for other people. Like, oh, I need to get this because then people will think that I haven't wasted my time.
Exactly.
That kind of phrase again. You know, if I'm going to prove to other people that this was worth doing, I'm going to have to achieve this result. And then sort of when I came to finish, is sort of being like, I know I was good. Like, I don't really need anyone else to know that anymore. You know, I didn't maybe have like these medals or achievements. I know how good I was myself. I'm like happy to move on.
Which just takes time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I think the other thing, I had someone explain to me the difference between like training and exercise. So like the way with rowing, the way you train, like the intensity that we train at, even like UT2 can be, you know, to a certain level of intensity. Essentially your body like can't differentiate different types of stress. So the way it explains whether you're being like chased by a bear or ragging yourself on the rowing machine, like to your body, this is just a level of stress and it's bringing it up. And you know, we sort of talk through what you need to do is be able to just go for a walk. And like you said, not measure yourself, not test yourself, not Strava, not time it, because you're kind of just keeping that, this is a stress thing. So this is just a form of exercise. And it's just every part of my life, I struggled to not like aim for perfection. Like if you spend 10 years being like nothing, like I heard the phrase the other day, it was like, almost doesn't count and good enough isn't. And that sounds like pretty horrific, but that's kind of how you get your head. Like it's good is the enemy of great is another one we used to use. And these are really great if you're trying to win the Olympics, and they're actually really unhelpful in real life. Just being able to do any form of sport and not be able to like play a game of Monopoly and lose my shit if I didn't.
Totally.
It gets really difficult because you've trained yourself to do it.
Exactly.
And I think it's another thing, like you said, we've spent, again, having got really good at something, it's then quite difficult to like not be good at other stuff. Like very frustrating to be like, why haven't I achieved this yet?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you spent 10 years getting there. You're not going to detune it in 3 weeks.
Totally. I mean, it was so funny when I first got back from Tokyo and I started doing some like analyst roles and started was working in management consulting, but had a internship before that at another AI consulting firm. And I remember being like, it was so cognitive. I think when you start something new and it's so difficult because you're like, I've just spent the last 4 months of my rowing career like making sure that my pinky finger's sitting there instead of there. You know, it's like all these little things, or making sure that my shoulders stay flat, or I'm not lifting off the couch, or, you know, make sure I'm just thinking about engaging my glutes out a little bit more, you know, just like lifting off, you know, it's like all these little micro changes because you were just such an expert in your field, to going back and like clicking slideshows while someone else is talking, you know, like you're putting different things together. And I remember being like, this is so funny that I went from being the equivalent of a partner and a manager, director in a company to now I'm back at being a junior level at this and other thing. And actually almost finding the humor in it, be like, well, no, I'm going to challenge that it's going to take me another 15 years to get there. But I think to go back to the training exercise piece, like I did put something up on the other day on my social media, and the response to that was insane, because it was like, it made me realize how much of there's a lack of education of that transition period, because you actually do need to detrain initially. But then it's like, so you're telling me that I've spent 15 years that my whole day is surrounded about like everything that I eat, my sleeping, my socializing, even when to go to the shops to get food because I don't want to walk around too much. That's the big nugget of my day, and everything else sits around that of the training. And then you're telling me I just need to fit it in every now and then, that my commute to work is enough, or like, you know, I go and stretch a little bit or do yoga or go for a coffee with my friends, like that's enough. And it's like, it's this big thing of like, oh my God, have I spent like this, it is that kind of, have I wasted X amount of time doing this? And you just lose your fitness straight away and everything. And I think something that I did that was, I think, really positive was I was living with my friend Alex Hagan, who I said I went to Henley with before, and we lived together, but she was amazing. That she had stopped rowing in 2017, but she was so patient with me and like kind of unlearning, and like it had taken her kind of a few years to kind of get her feet, and she's crushing it now. But it was like straight away of being like, oh, I feel like going for a run, and she'd be like, why? And then I'd be like, I don't know why, you know, and it's like, well, let's just go for a walk with our dogs, you know. And I got a dog straight away. I've always wanted a dog. So I bought a dog, Peppa. She was actually born the day that we left to go to Tokyo. So it was just a beautiful little omen. But like I got her when she was a puppy, and like initially I was a little bit resentful because I was like, well, I have to like teach her how to walk. I can't just go for a run or go for weights or something. Like I needed to put her first. And so I ended up just doing my exercise with her as she got bigger and stronger, I was able to like do more. But like at the start I was kind of like, wait, I have to prioritize something over my exercise. Like that's bizarre. And it ended up being like the best thing ever, because was my favorite thing to do before work would take her for a run or a walk before work, because I'm just seeing the joy of that. But like, I think actually having something that takes priority over the training or the exercise. And then I was working 2 jobs on top of that as well. I'm like, I couldn't just go for a run because I had like deliverables with work. And like, I think it was just like this very stark contrast of like what's actually important in life, and finding the joy in exercise rather than feeling it being a burden of training. I think like there's so many different things and different unlearnings. And so that's something that like straight away I'm like, I'm not training for anything. And like I do a few, like every now and then, like we'll do a half marathon and like different competitions and stuff. I'm like, I never say that I want to do a time, but I'm like, okay, well I did that if I can get around there. Like, you know, I just try to make it a fun social thing of like, okay, I'm going to go do this run with a few mates and we're going to go grab a coffee after or something like that. And like finding the joy in that and that camaraderie. And now it's like probably evolving more into joining a team sport, but like it's those baby steps. But like sometimes I think it's also being okay, like, you know, even if you're on this like journey of, yeah, I'm doing this exercise thing, and then all of a sudden you sit in the gym for X amount of time and just like fall back into your old habits, but actually not being too hard on yourself. Like, oh, for some reason that suited me today. And like, I wonder why that is. And then like, it's just being curious of going, okay, well, that's okay if I like kind of like went and did training, but it's like just coming back and be like, well, why do I feel like I need to do that?
Yeah. Having been a good few years out of rowing now, I think when talk about rowing being difficult, one way I've kind of described it is I said to people like, yeah, rowing is hard, but it's like a single problem life.
Yeah.
Like you only have one problem.
Yeah.
And every single situation is, well, you know, what is that going to affect? Like, are you going to go to this wedding? No, because I've got rowing. Like, are you doing? No, I'm training. No,
Yeah.
And then that's, it becomes a little bit too simple. You don't really have to think about it. And then post-career, it's like, well, am I going to train harder, or am I going to do this, or am I going to go to that party, or am I going to do that? And then you're like, oh my God, I've never had this many options.
Totally.
Which is like always just be able to go, no, rowing.
Yeah.
There's that. I think the other thing is like measuring your self-worth.
Yeah.
I think for a very long time, I had ranked myself along other rowers. So everyone who was a better rower than me was a better person than me.
Yeah.
Somehow, I don't know why, or was a more successful person.
Yeah.
It took me a very long time to like find my own success in other ways.
Yeah.
To then be like, oh, they were a better rower than me, but it doesn't mean they're a more successful or better person.
Yeah.
Not to put them down, but like it's difficult in that sense.
Yeah, totally. And I think that like I try really hard now not to compare myself to others. And when I feel like people are comparing themselves to me, I immediately shut that down, or like, you know, or I immediately just kind of see like I don't want to like play that game with them, because like what I'm doing with my life is what I want to do, and I'm trying to be the best version of myself. And I think kind of just coming from that premise, and that was something that we worked on a lot.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Exactly. And I think like now, like even in the MBA, like it's a cohort of 320 people, and you're at Oxford. It's like this smartest, like I've never been in an environment like this before, but also we have so many amazing people from all over the world. And straight away what they talk about is like not having any imposter syndrome. Yeah. And it was so interesting because I created this dialogue a few years ago. I was like, well, I'm not going to compare myself to anyone. I'm just going to be the best version of myself. So I came in here and be like, yeah, well, I know I, have limited corporate experience, but I have a plethora of X experience, and trying to be a good role model of that, be like, I think everyone in the program deserves to be there, and everyone at Oxford deserves to be here for whatever reason. But I think where you come from a position of competition, and to actually like not buy into that as kind of like this anti-culture thing, and it's actually being like, well, I just want to be around other amazing people who inspire me every day. And that means I'm going to be around other like really, really high performing people. And sometimes I'm going to see someone do something amazing, and instead of being like, oh my God, I can't do that, be like, how cool that they can do that. So it's like all these little mindset shifts, but I think it comes back down to like you were saying of the self-worth piece of knowing that you're enough, and knowing that you don't, all that really matters, or all that people like that what you think about yourself is the most important thing. And not in a selfish way, but being like understanding your worth and understanding that you deserve opportunities. But that does take, you can't just like flick a switch overnight. Like that just takes so much time.
How much of like those reflections came since you finished rowing, and how much of that did you carry around with you during your career? Because like, it sounds like you've really thought all of this like through, and it's like really difficult to imagine that like you weren't always like this person even when you were in the Australian team.
Yeah, I think it kind of came about probably in the last 2 years of, probably the last 2-3 years of my rowing career, where I really was like trying to just stay in my own lane. Before I used to like, there was little things where, I would always get yelled at for looking out of the boat, which is like the most annoying thing as a coach. But that took me until probably being in the Tokyo crew, where Lucy, who was making a call, like I just said, yell at me whenever I look out until I stop looking out. I'm just like, because I remember her having a conversation with me. She's like, she would get distracted because she would start to look out, or she would be like, that means that you're not trusting what I'm calling when I would look out of the boat. And I was like, oh, I was looking out because I was like, I used to play basketball because it was an offensive defense. You have to know what else is going around. Or like, I used to make the calls because then, I wanted to see what was going on, blah, blah, blah. But it was like just an excuse to be like, no, because I wasn't trusting my ability that what I was doing was good enough. And I would look over my shoulder to see what else is like. The amount of energy it wastes to like look over and be like, oh my God, they're moving, rather than be like, well, I know the race plan and I know I just need to execute what Lucy's saying. Like that's so much simple. So like to answer your question, it was this evolving, but I think it wasn't until like those little things in the last year where when we came into Tokyo, like we'd never raced internationally before in that combination. We had 50% preparation. We'd never been on the course. We had to arrive in Tokyo 5 days before. Like we had 2 races, and so we had 14 minutes of racing. My whole Olympic experience is less than 14 minutes of racing. So you have to get everything right. you know, the day before my final, I was in a pair training, you know, so it's like you had to just execute and I went into that competition being like, we just need to do what we've already done. And I think like the only way we got there was actually understanding that we were worthy of being the best. And if we would have like make a conscious effort as a 4 to hang out as mates as well and just do things and switch off. And I remember Jess saying once, she was like, Gal's like, we are doing such a good job. She's like, if someone else beats us when we're doing this, like they deserve it, because she's like, I don't know what else we could do. And to actually verbalize that was so amazing, because we're like, you know, respect to them if you can go faster than us, because we're literally breaking records in the thing. Like we broke the Olympic record by 14 seconds. Wow. You know, but it's like, it hadn't been in the Olympics since 92, but it's like, okay, well, we're going to break and we were like this much off breaking the world record, which was set in Amsterdam.
Which is the fastest course.
Amazing course, but like the gals that are in there, they rode that boat, like, you know, they have that world record, you know, but like to actually go out and break a world record by 14 seconds is like crazy. Yeah. And, you know, and then the Dutch were 0.36 seconds ahead of behind us, right? Who came second in Tokyo, but they were an amazing crew as well. And they're still amazing rowers. So you have to really respect the competitors. Like we had, you know, 5 crews that broke the world record that day. You know, how cool, but we just broke it by that little bit more. So I think it's like that respect to the competitor piece as well.
So let's talk about the games, I guess. Having missed out in 2016 and then dedicating yourself fully to making the Olympics, the setbacks of COVID, having to train by yourself, etc. Like you're saying, like doing a pair the night before the final. What was the event like as an experience for you? What did it mean for you to go to Tokyo? And was it what you were expected or something different?
I guess like not going to the Olympics, I didn't have, you know, we initially were told that the Olympics would be like in complete lockdown. So you'd have to sit in your room all day and then meals would be brought to you and you weren't able to like even walk around the village apart from your race. But by the time we got there, it was a little bit looser. So pretty much our day to day was like we flew in 5 days before. And then and you were able to like go to the dining hall, but they had like those like dividers and they said you weren't allowed to talk during you walked into the dining hall and there was like the surgeon sinks that you had to scrub your arms up to like your elbows and then put on gloves, and then you were given an individual tray, and then you were given your food, and then you sat behind your divider, then you ate your food, and then you left. Like that was kind of as much social time as we got. But
surreal.
It was super surreal. And then you'd go to the course, but every morning you had to wake up and do a COVID test, and then you would only find out if you had COVID at midday, but if you didn't get COVID, you weren't notified. So you're just kind of waiting around to see if you had COVID, which obviously none of us got, which was great. And then you go the days before you go, train, come back, just stay away from people, sleep, watch TV, do it again. And then the day of our heat, the women's pair, which we had practiced many, many times, but the women's pair heat was 2 hours before the women's 4 heat. So we would practice that. We would pre-row in the 4, and then me and Lucy would hang out in the athlete room. Jess and Annabelle would go do their heat. Then we would pretty much get the boat ready to be on the water, and then they would have a bit of chill time, and then me and Lucy would do a land warm-up, and then we'd meet just before, get on a little bit later, go do our heat. Came down, luckily day 1 all great. And then
how did that race go?
Which was
the first
good.
Time you'd raced.
Yeah, and like I remember it was just like, geez, I haven't thought about this in so long. I think because we had simulation regattas in Australia, so we're just like we had a plan that we needed to execute. So we had we had the Irish who ended up getting a bronze in our heat, and they were really good for as well. And we were quite close to them. They were quite close to us. But we had a good race, and we executed everything that we needed to do. So like jog, box tick, you just like absolute operation. And also, it was on salt water, the course, which means that the water's more buoyant, and it was very hot and humid as well, which means the boat's going really fast. So we actually ended up changing our rig a little bit. So we rigged a little bit higher than we were usually because we were just that much higher off the water. So we stress test this on a saltwater course a couple of months before in Adelaide in South Australia. So we had a big plan that we knew that like things would be different. And then we all had a day off, and then the next day was supposed to be the women's pair semi. Then a typhoon came through that day, which delayed the Olympic racing. So then we were told like around that time that now that was going to be changed, which changed it to 2 hours after the 4 final, because it was only, we didn't have to go through the repechage, obviously. And that was like, because we would meet at like 5 or 6 every night to have like a chat as a 4. And we're like, well, that sucks, but we're just going to have, you know, rejig the plan. And I think Jess and Annabelle handled it really, really well. And I remember I had a little bit of a freak out. Like I had a moment of like, oh my God, like shit, what are we going to do? It's only 2 hours after, like, how's that going to work? And then one of the teammate on the men's team was like, Rosie, you just need to be the best 2-seat that you can be. And I was like, yeah, that's all I can control. Like he was like, you can't control what the pair's doing. You just have to be the best 2-seat. And it was like the best thing that someone could say that knew me really well and was like, you just need to control what you can control. And I was like, it helped me not go down this death spiral. So I'll always be thankful for that, of like having a teammate to like, who's obviously got their own, you know, high pressure thing to be like, no, stop it. And I think having that conversation really helped, because I was like, okay, I can't control what the pair's doing. I can't control the situation, but I'm just going to be supportive for them. If they need to have a moment that really sucks, I will be a supportive teammate. But when it comes down to it, I can only control what I can control.
Was it their semi before your final, or the pair's final before that?
It was the women's 4 final. 2 hours later was the women's pair semi.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, the typhoon came through, and then the morning of, I think we did pre-row in the 4, rowed the 4, and it was just like, I remember when we started, because we had like this, it was so much nervous energy, right? But I just remember thinking like, thank God I'm here. Like, I just want to get on that start line and just do it. Like, I'm so sick of waiting. And it's so much like that. I was like, just get me in the middle of the race, because I was so excited and I wasn't nervous. I was like, thank God we made it, because now we can actually do what we want. And it was just like, once we were going, like no one can stop us. You can finally take your masks off, because we had to walk around the boat park with masks, and you could only have the masks off when you were sitting in the boat. And I remember like just before the start, like there was the, like on the, right where the umpires were, it was like the Olympic rings. And I almost thought, I was like, well, this is the moment, you know, it's like, you know, I'm like, well, this is it. Like this is it, you know. And I think it was almost funny that I'm like, I can't believe that I spent 15 years of my rowing career thinking of this moment, and then it happens and it feels so normal, because it was also eerily quiet, because there was no spectators or crowds or anything, and you're like, oh my God. And then you go, and we had this thing that we would kind of have a countdown internally for 5 minutes. So 5 minutes before the race, we would kind of absorb everything that had happened. 4 minutes before, thinking about like X, and then 3 minutes before, thinking about, you know, what we can control on the boat. 2 minutes before, like thinking about a crew and just pumping each other out, and then the last minute just thinking about the first stroke. So we would think big and then bring it down. So like actually be okay to, in that 1 minute, 5 minutes before, to be like, holy shit, like this is the moment. But then going, okay, well, that's the moment. Now let's go down to like, yep, we've done the work. Yes, our crew is ready to go. Yes, I'm just going to think about the first stroke, which I think was like just to kind of almost pull all that energy. And then the race was amazing. And we just did everything that we said we were going to do.
Right from the first stroke?
Yeah,
really?
absolutely. And the only thing was like by the last 500 meters, a side wind came through, and it started getting really, really messy, and a bit of water like came onto my inside hand, and my like the last like 20 strokes, my inside hand was just like slipping down. So I was like completely wide grip by the end of the last stroke. Like it was like on the actual like very deep down on like the shaft of the oar.
Yeah, the loom, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like literally rowing wide grip, but because the hand, like my grip had just gone, because it was just so slippery and sweaty. And so like the last 30 strokes, I was like, just don't crap, because was literally rowing wide grip, like with my inside arm.
That's with the outside hand.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, just stay really relaxed inside arm, you're fine. And I was like, but you know.
How many coaches are like, you don't feather with the outside hand, like in that moment. Here we go.
I was full just like, don't crab. And then the Dutch, if you've watched the race, like the Dutch have an amazing finish, and you know, like we had some messy strokes and they had some messy strokes, and it all gets very, very close in the end. But like, I think when I get asked a lot, like, what did it feel like at the end?
When did you know?
Well, because I didn't look out of the boat, Lucy was saying, I was like, I don't know. No, Lucy was like, we did it. And I think from that, I was like, yep, we did it, because I know Lucy would not say anything. And then it was probably like 40 seconds before we actually, but I remember I was like kind of just in front of the bow seat. So I was like, okay, unless I'm like really off. But I think it was like this massive sense of relief. Like I just started bawling my eyes out. It was like this very like animalistic response of like just letting everything out. And then that moment of like everything that's kind of gone wrong and everything's going on, but like this is this one thing that no one can take away from me and us right now. And it was just like that beautiful closure moment of like, we have done the thing. So that was super amazing. And then straight away, I think the first thing I said was like, well, we need to get the boat off the water because Annabelle and Jess have to go cool down on the watt bikes, you know? So we went to the podium, and then me and Lucy like went and did a lot of media stuff, and then Annabelle and Jess jumped on the watt bike, and then we changed into our like podium kit. We all went on the podium, had a nice time, and then we went off, and then Jess and Annabelle had to go straight to the start line and do their semi, which unfortunately they missed out on the A final. And they were a really big medal favorite, which was, you know, obviously very disappointing for them. But, you know, I think that that's something that's, you know, so unusual, because it gave me a lot of perspective of like our goal was 2 medals, right? So it has this like air of sadness that, you know, what the gold medal and the 4 represents is something that the pair missed out on the, you know, on a medal. And they're so worthy of an amazing result. And I hope that they get closure in this event, because, you know, they are such an amazing pair, for Paris. So I think that's the funny thing, that's like, you know, sitting there and not being able to, because I had the B final the next day as well. So we couldn't really celebrate it as a 4. And then you get shipped out, and I had to sit in hotel quarantine for 2 weeks after, and then got back to Melbourne, and, it was, I mean, terrible. But also it's like, to answer your question before of like, you know, what was the experience like? I think going in and knowing that it would be a COVID safe Olympics and you're just there to go from A to B, it really stripped the whole event down to like the reason why you're there is to like perform in your craft. And that's the only way I can justify it, because you didn't have the parties, and you didn't have the Oakley 10, and you didn't have the, you know, all the fun spectacle. We didn't get the parades and stuff in Melbourne because, you know, usually medalists come back first class, but because we had to be back on a different flight, we're in economy. You know, it's like all these things that I remember being like so salty about it, but they'd be like, Rosie, you just won a gold medal. Like that is external approval, and that's not what it's about. Like, it's about just breaking records, done. Winning a gold medal, done. Doing it with your best mates, done. Like, what more can you ask for?
And no one's going to take that away.
No one can take that away. Yeah. And to say like, you know, I'm an undefeated Olympian. Like, I've never lost an Olympic Games. Sick. You know? So it's like, sick. Yeah. You know? So it's like, okay, well, I can sit with that and pick up all the other pieces around it. But it's the constant check of yourself of, you know, even when I was in Paris, when I was, you know, had that thing, but like, oh, interesting. Like, you know, that is that. You know, if you're an athlete, I think that you're a natural performer and you want to like create spectacle, and I love that feeling of feeling like the spotlight's on me and I'm still performing under all the pressure. You
say that, but then the first thing you did when you crossed the line and having just won like the Olympics was like, look out for your teammates. Like, they need to cool down. Like, it's their well-being like over mine. And like, that's the pinnacle career, like everything that you worked for. And that's like, I think that just speaks volumes to your character, who you are as a person.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. I think that's good.
What else? No, not asking for external prayer. No, just go. Just absolutely kidding.
I feel like, it's so hard to do, isn't it? It's easy to talk about. It's easy to give other people advice, but to be able to do it yourself is another thing.
Absolutely.
And I think there's so many things that you've done in your career, which is really impressive.
Thank you.
And I definitely think you should keep talking about what you did, because I think a lot of what you did is what other people should be doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So that when you got back, instantly you thought, okay, that's me over. What was that, like a sense of freedom, or how did you? Obviously, you said that you just got a dog, so you gave yourself like a purpose. You went from having a purpose for 15 years to then. I think that's why a lot of like actually athletes struggle with their life after rowing, because you've had your purpose defined for you, and then you're in charge of finding it, and it's like different for a different person.
Yeah.
For every single different person, so you can't necessarily also like take someone's advice, but then caring for someone else or for something else, like getting a dog, that's like a purpose right out of the bat.
Yeah.
Was that like big?
I mean, that wasn't a conscious decision. Like, so initially I really was not sure. I think in the back, it's kind of like when you know what the answer is and then you just kind of have to sit with it and not, I didn't want to make like a very impulsive decision to go back. So
that would be smart.
Yeah. So when we were still in hotel quarantine, John, who was my coach, called me up we chatted every few days, but he called me up. It was just kind of a bit of a check-in a week after. He's like, so it's like literally the day, like a week to the day of us missing, of winning. And he's like, well, so what's your decision? Like, do you think you'll come back? And I was like, I think I need a year to make the decision. And I said, I know that's really difficult. And like for me, I viewed it as like, well, I know that he needs to know what like resources he has. Like I didn't take it personally like, oh, he's pushing me to come back. But I'm like, as a coach, you need to know who you, like he's already in we had a chat. He's like, he's already in next year's like trying to figure out who he's got, right? Because that's like his job on the line.
Yeah.
And I said, John, I know it's like could be really frustrating for you, but I need a year to decide because I'm literally sitting in a room in Chinatown in Sydney right now doing nothing, by myself. Like I can't make that decision of if I want to row because I don't even know. I haven't even smelled fresh air in a week. And then I said, I need a year. And he said, okay, and then we kind of kept me on the books. And I then got back to Melbourne a week after that call. And then the day I got back, the Victorian government, which is the state I'm from, announced another lockdown where you couldn't go 5Ks out of your home. You had a 8 p.m. curfew and you couldn't be outside for more than 2 hours a day. And that was until Christmas. So that's another 5 or 6 months. So I was back at mum and dad's house initially. And like, I think what I did for the first few weeks was like, so I got my dog and then watched like Survivor with my parents. I was like, that was what I did. And then, like I said, I did some like guest speaking gigs, just some like a bit of media stuff, and then started an internship, which was really great. And then from there kind of I really was putting rowing on the side. And I kind of toyed with the idea initially of doing a Queen's Cup, which is all the top women and men from each state of Australia do the Kings and Queens Cup event at the Australian Nationals, which is just like an 8s race at the end of the Nationals, which was a lot of fun. And I kind of toyed with that for a little bit, but then I didn't want to, and I got like an exemption to do the ergo and stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm not doing it right. Like I don't want to be at the thing. So I actually pulled away and I was like, if I want to do it, I'm going to do it properly. And I was kind of resentful to like go down and train. And I was making, I don't think excuses, but I was prioritizing other things rather than going down. And I just kind of started working, what did I do? I was working front of house at a yoga studio for a little bit. I did that, consulting gig, and then I got a job at KPMG as a management consultant, which was really great. So that was in March of 2022. And then I think from there I was starting to work, and then like an opportunity, I kind of started talking maybe to Cambridge, Oxford about maybe do I want to start doing the boat race, and like if that was kind of the only thing in rowing that I hadn't done. And then I was like, well, what kind of degree would you want to do? And then the MBA kind of seemed like a good idea. So I actually came over here and visited Cambridge and Oxford and met the coaches and looked at the campuses and stuff. And then I think through that experience, thought it was a really cool program. But I just realized that like, because I had gone to being a student athlete before, I was like really excited about being a student again, but I didn't want to put sport and fit the academics around. And I think actually coming here and seeing like how cool it is, but not really wanting to do it for the right reasons kind of helped solidify my decision. So then I think from that really helped. And then a year to the day after the games, John called me and the high performance director called me and they're like, okay, well, what's your decision? And I said, well, I had a really amazing conversation. I think I just said to them like, if I come back, like I don't think I would come back for the right reasons, and I still very much love the sport and I want to keep it that way. But I think if I did come back, I wouldn't be the same athlete. Like I don't have any hunger or desire. I just felt like very satisfied with it. Yeah. And I was like, I just wouldn't put in the work properly, and I don't want to like just overcook it and it end up detracting from what we've done. So it was actually such an amazing conversation with John, and he, we have a very great working relationship, and he just kind of thanked me for my services. And, we have it was such a cool, a cool conversation to have because I was so emotional. It made me realize like how lucky I was to take control of that decision for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a year after, and then soon after that I applied to like Oxbridge, and then like that kind of snowballed, and then I got in, and you know, the kind of rest is and then here we are. So I think having something else that's working with other people in high performing environments, which is like the MBA, and being around other people that are really driven and share very similar mindsets to me, but in very completely different ways, is like the perfect environment for right now, because I don't feel like, you know, I'm not inspired, but I'm just inspired to do things in really different ways. And I'm so busy, and, you know, I think the nature of the program, because it's 1 year, it is so full on, but you can't, and the classes change so fluidly, and you can't really have that routine. And it's kind of like been this almost electric shock of redoing everything and just kind of being okay to go with it and not having as much structure, but also knowing that I do like to have structure. So when I'm kind of back in whatever I end up doing next, is I do really like exercising. I do like spending time to dedicate that during my day, but it's like I've kind of gone to the other extreme and going like coming back somewhere in the middle, but it's not being hard on myself if I don't have time to go to the gym now, or, you know, if I can get a run in and stuff like that. So it's actually this perfect kind of almost rebalancing, and I don't know how I'm going to feel when Paris is going to come up, but I feel really good that I am here doing this right now, and I don't feel jealous that they're doing it. I actually genuinely wish everyone well.
I think it takes such an incredible level of maturity to look at the situation and be like, if I came back, it wouldn't be for the right reasons. So I'm out, because actually long term, I think I'd regret coming back more than calling it now and then exploring other areas of life. I mean, that's just such a fascinating message. And I think a lot of people are going to be inspired by it.
Oh, thank you.
So that's good.
Yeah, it's definitely another commendable thing. Like always sort of said, like knowing when to walk away is it's really hard, especially when you sort of taught yourself some mentality of that, you know, it's always forward, and there's no like way to do it. It's really hard to watch someone, especially who's your friend, maybe who's achieved a certain level and is just slogging away and not quite being able to get there again. But it's their journey. But yeah, I think it's a commendable thing to do. And same thing, I think you're right. Like you can't find the new balance without going off in a few different places.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like just being like fabulously inconsistent is kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm like, all right, like this week I'm really into this, and then maybe there'll be something completely different. And like almost, I always think it's quite funny. I'm like, I must be like, I feel like I'm just this little firework going around doing all these little different things. But I know that like if I don't do it now and get it out of my system while I'm like accountable for no one else but me, and I'm not hurting anyone else, but I'm just like really just exploring and giving myself that time. Because I think if you don't do it, it's going to come and manifest itself into other ways and in more destructive, like, I guess, behaviors. So, I mean, that's what's working for me. And I think kind of like you were saying before, that there's no one size fits all way to retire from sport. Because it's like if someone wants to be a doctor after they finish sport compared to someone who wants to be a rowing coach and wants to really stay in that community, you can't have a plan that both of those people can do. Like, I think it is kind of a very choose your own adventure, but it is taking accountability no matter what end of the spectrum. And if you want to, like, having parents that they love rowing so much and they have dedicated their life to it, but they did have a section of time where they went away from it. But they don't do it for the politics of rowing, that they love rowing and they love the lessons it is, and they've created an amazing, very successful business out of that. You know, they do a lot of other stuff as well, but you know, it's so funny because, you know, the daughter of people that are so deeply entrenched in rowing, and to not have anything to do with that right now, it's like quite interesting to the dynamics of it, because it doesn't quite make sense. And I would never want to be perceived as like rejecting this thing that actually is something that's really important to me as well.
It's only just for now. I promise you'll never get away.
No, but why would you want to? You know, like it's this community that I know I could go into, like any boathouse or anything like that, and you have that common sense of community. And I don't think that people should shy away from that, although that's unhealthy. But I think it's the tying your self-worth to it, that I think it's with anything, even if you had a partner or something and you tied all your self-worth to that partner, and then that ends, then that's not healthy either. Or you tie all your self-worth to work or playing piano or something like that, and then you can't do it anymore and everything falls apart. Like, I think it's very agnostic to anything. So I think with rowing, because it's the nature of the personalities that it attracts, which is very intense personalities, it can maybe be magnified. But I think as someone who's kind of on the outskirts of it, I know that I can dip into it, but I know that there's a time where I need to walk away and do something else.
I mean, it's a good idea to let your obsessive personality just go wild for a little bit and just explore different things and see what you get attached to, because unless you explore many different things, you might not possibly find the thing that you're really going to enjoy in like the portion of your life, right?
Exactly. Totally. I fully agree.
I imagine like your parents, they must have been so proud. Like, they're both Olympic medalists, and then for them to have you after the games for a few months in their home and knowing that you also brought home a medal, that must have just been like incredible.
Yeah. No, they're pretty I am so inspired by them, and I think I know that they are so incredibly proud, and it was cool to kind of be back there, and even being in lockdown during that time, as a 30-year-old being like locked down in your parents' house, like, but then the way I viewed it was going as an adult, how often do you get to just hang out with your folks? And I get along with them really well. And, I have been away from Melbourne for such a long period of time that like, it's actually going, none of us are getting any younger, that I really cherish that time, because I think it was such a soft landing of coming home, and for them it was so good because they'd been locked down with each other for the last 2 years. And my brother, he lives 700 meters away from mum and dad as well, so we're all very tight. And to actually spend that time with my family, because we don't really have much family outside of Australia. Like, I don't view it as like, a burden. I was like, it's whatever way, but that nuclear family to me is so, so important. So I feel very grateful to have that time, and, it will be cool, like, whenever I end up getting back to Melbourne, to really nurture that as well. Yeah.
I'm just in love with your attitude. It's like, I'm just trying to like sit here and take it all in. It's like, it's so good.
Thank you.
It's another thing, having spoken to some hemisphere nations as well, that you kind of forget, is that you guys spend months away from home. You'll come like from a couple of weeks before the first World Cup till the end of how much of that year?
It's usually gone from like the whole European summer, but I would see my parents or my family like, 3 or 4 times a year maybe, because I was in Penrith. Yeah. So you see them, but, you spend the whole time sleeping or eating, when you're back there, when you're training, rather than, that's what I loved about being back in Melbourne last year, was the normality of being able to pop in for a dinner or going for a walk or doing something, very normal, like the novelty of that. And it's not like this spectacle when you go home. It's like, oh my God, Rosie's home. Because I left Australia in 2010. And, I've been bouncing around all over the world since then. And then, so the Aussies are usually gone for 3 months every year. Yeah. But you get like 2 weeks off a year or something, so it's not much. And you are kind of a zombie during that. So to, kind of have my personality and, be a functioning, balanced human as well. It's really cool.
Yeah. And it's never really off, is it? Like,
no.
Coach, like, you should definitely have 3 weeks off. Are you training?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's all appropriate at the time. And I think understanding that it is, there is an expiry, but not being afraid of that. The end looming, I think, is something that's really important as well. But yeah, making sure that I think if you feel pressured to understand like when to push and when to pull away, I think is super important as you get older.
But I also think like, you shouldn't be scared about those sort of like finite, those sort of end points.
No.
Like, I think people who just kind of bat it down the road almost get less done if you can confront it and be like, right, this is the amount of time I have to do this in. You can force yourself to achieve more, rather than, oh, this will be here forever.
Yeah, and it's not. I think something my mum used to say, or still says, she's like, life is always a series of new beginnings, which I thought was so good, and I think, if you view it like that, that it's, to always know that the best is yet to come, whatever that may be. And, to achieve this amazing thing before I'm 30 and then going, oh, I'm so curious about what next. Like, I don't think I'll ever feel that level of intensity ever again. And I don't know if I want to, because it's so exhausting. But I think to have like developed so much more meaning in like thinking about things like maybe at a bit of a slower pace and not in this time box of 3-4 year cycles is, a new challenge in itself, but it actually like thinking long term to 10, 20 years in the future, but also understanding like it's time to kind of prioritize other things and slowing down, but also like, my work doesn't need to be as like, I guess so tied up with everything that I do. Like moving forward, I don't want to have be defined by my job. I want to have a very, almost like a portfolio of things that I do. Because I don't like being told what to do, and I don't like to like be boxed into doing things, but I know that's me. But I had to do that when I was rowing, and I had to conform and do that. But that was context specific and appropriate then, but that's not really how I live my life. But, I'm so excited to see what's next after this, but I'm just really, really enjoying the MBA now and meeting really, really cool people. And just kind of seeing what happens next. It's really cool.
I think you're well on your way there, and then definitely keep letting that rebel come out. I think that's a very good point to bring us to quick fire round questions. So, out of all the rowing venues that you've trained at, raced at, or visited, what are some of your favorites?
Agbolet in France.
Oh, that comes up a lot.
It is
We need to go.
so beautiful. I mean, we got 8th. As the women's 8 in 2015 World Championships. That was one of the most beautiful venues I've ever been to. But I think locally, Tasmania Lake Barrington is just like this magical place.
I've had that before.
Yeah.
Tim Foster.
Tim Foster.
Yeah.
Well, Tim Foster's such a good man.
We'll get you up together, I suppose.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, we had actually had a coffee that day. It was like 3.5 hours. It's just like, I thought think he is amazing.
Can't have a 20-minute chat with Tim.
Yeah.
No.
And then I think, Lucerne is something that's, I mean, you probably know, but like that is just like the Mecca, right? Just everything about it is I think what it signifies, and like, it's always that World Cup 3, or I've never been to the last chance regatta or anything, but it is just such a cool place. So those I think would be, shout out to the Yarra River in Melbourne where I learnt to row.
Nice.
Nice.
If you were to repeat one race or one event again when you're 60 or 70, what would it be and why?
If I was to repeat a race,
You could relive it or redo it. It's up to you.
I think, I mean, it sounds cliche, but I think the race in Tokyo, I think finishing that race and not taking that moment to like really soak it in, I kind of wish I had to really feel it, because I went straight to the next task. And that's, I think, being so task oriented is that devil curse, but I kind of just always tried to rush through that little bit, because I think I was really overwhelmed that we'd done it. So I wouldn't change anything about the race, but I would change that like 30 seconds straight after.
You'd keep the inside hand, yeah?
No, I kept loose, but it would just be that moment of finishing and just like absolutely just soaking that moment in and not thinking about what's next. I think it was just that like 30 seconds where I started to like just think next steps, where I could have just soaked it in.
That'll always be hard with all achievements in life.
Yeah, I think it was something that no one knows what you're going to feel until it happens. But I just remember being like, oh my God, it happened. And then like, oh, well, what's next? And it's like, because I think you're so in the gear of when you do a good piece in training, and it's always like, okay, next. But to like, I mean, that's what I try to do in everything in my life. Like, if you see a beautiful sunrise, don't take a photo of it, just look at it for 30 seconds. It's like, it's just stopping and slowing down. So that's what I would do a little bit differently. But I think one of my favorite races, that year we had a Queen's Cup event in Tasmania, and we had a really cool crew of the Victorians, and like I was put in stroke seat for it, and we just had it was just such a cool, I know we dominated the race, but I just remember thinking like, it was just such a cool feeling
Fun.
It was a lot of fun, and we just like, it was, that was a really, really cool one. I think just to kind of be put in the stroke seat, which I obviously like no seat. There was like a bit of controversy of like who should stroke and stuff, but me being like, no, I'm the best person for that job, and like, no, I'm owning it. And it was kind of a piece of like fully like unleashing and knowing my capacity of like, I don't need to like be in the middle. I can row any seat. And that kind of like really took a bit of ownership over it. Yeah, it was a really fun race. Oh, and then there was another one at Cal. So many fun races, but my freshman year, at Berkeley, I was in the varsity 8, and it was for Pac-12s, which was like your region competitions. and it was like there was like a thunderstorm coming through, and like when lightning comes, you obviously can't like row anymore. But the quickest way that we could get down was if we raced it. And and I remember like we were about to start the race, and then someone false started, so we had to like go back and then restart the race. But then it was like really like coming down with the rain, and we could kind of see this like literal electric storm coming through. And then we started the race again, but then the Cox box died like 10 strokes in. And then what happened was like, I think I was in like 3 or 5 or something, but like we were like on like sending the messages up and down the boat, and we ended up winning the race. But like, it was just like to see this like thing coming at us with like everyone working in sync when like we didn't have a Cox box and a women's 8 when you couldn't hear anything. It was just so chaotic, but like it was just such a cool race. So that would have been 2010. Yeah. It's in Sacramento, California.
Sounds good. That's a good course
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Such good answers there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Question I ask is, if you could travel back in time to the age you were when you first fell in love with rowing, what advice would you give that person?
I think be patient. I think I would say don't be so hard on yourself. And I would say, like really, really listen to your body more, because I used to really push through injury and all this other stuff and really get myself into quite a pickle where I couldn't unscramble a few eggs, where I could have really prevented a lot of heartache and a lot of pain. Yeah.
Okay, 3 good answers.
Yeah.
I've got a special question. What are some of your favorite like sessions or erg sessions that you've done? Because obviously I know how the British team and the Polish team trains, but like over in Australia, is there anything that you guys do vastly differently?
We actually didn't do that much erging. I mean, we would mainly do like 2x30 or 3x30s, or like, what do we do? We'd almost do like, well, that was, I mean, what for the national team, like, yeah, we would do like base stuff, but I really, actually like the last few, like last year of my rowing, I've really learned to love the 2K, which is crazy because I think we would do like this 2x1500 meter like prep before, but I just think I kind of figured out how to like do the 2K. And it's so much easier once you like kind of figure it out, right? And I liked the 2x1500 before you get that like kind of electric nervous energy and stuff. So yeah, we didn't do too much. We did like just mainly base stuff because we had the luxury of being able to row all year round and do our pieces. We would do like power strokes and stuff. But I don't know. I just kind of learned how to really like doing 2Ks.
Not what I was expecting.
Yeah, which is super. I never thought of it, but I think like, I changed my mentality of like, I used to be so fearful of it, like that breaking 7 minutes or, you know, that like, I think I came in with a 6:56 and I left with a 6:38 at my 2K.
It's a big step.
Yeah. It was like over a 3-year period of time. And I think it was like, you know, I think my first year I was like 52 and then under like every year I just would make such big leaps. But I think it was just like this little game that I started playing with myself. And I like, instead of thinking it was so horrible, actually just start looking forward to it and just like that nervous, bubbly feeling that you get that like you just, and almost like laughing at it because it's like so silly that but this thing that defines who you are as a rower, right? And, I don't know, I embrace the challenge because it's like, you have to do it. So instead of like fearing it and fearing like what it's like, just be like, okay, well, I've done the work. So,
it's just another great take on
yeah.
on how to deal with those things.
Yeah.
Who are some of your rowing idols or the people that you've looked up to during or post your career?
Yeah. So my parents definitely, for sure. I'm trying to think of people over time. Yeah, like Tim Foster was someone that I really looked up to. I remember watching like Gold Fever and just think, I don't know. I just think that like, and actually having to meeting him, and we really aligned on so much of like, you know, he's quite eccentric and just kind of does his own thing and just is such a wonderful man. But I remember like watching that doco and just thinking like, you know, I remember when he went into the 8 after he hurt his hand and just making the most of that that boat. I remember that was something like in 2018, I made the women's 4, but then like 10 days before World Championships, I actually broke my rib and then was changed out of the women's 4 and put into the women's 8. And we're in Bulgaria, and I was like just rowing on a broken rib, and remember thinking like, you can go into this boat and make it really negative that you're coming from like a more prioritized boat. But I remember coming in and be like, nah, let's just have an absolute time. Like, this boat had been coming 5th, like let's get it on the podium. And we ended up getting a bronze that year. Actually, that would have been one of my favorite races, the 2018, the World Championships that year, because I was in so much pain. But like, that Leah Saunders, who was the bow seat of that crew, I remember I came in and she was like, welcome home. Like, they just embraced me into this like really dynamic crew, which was a lot of fun. I think Kim Brennan is an amazing athlete, and I really liked how she really went in and did her own thing. I mean, you have the greats like the men's Kiwi pair and then like Grace and Kerry, who were the pair in Tokyo. And I think the way that they went about their career with Grace is not Grace, but yes, Grace, but like the way that it went about it, and they were always, to go and come in before I kind of got on the scene and be like, oh my gosh, this amazing pair. And then being able to get to know them, and, Grace lives in London now, and, say hi to them, and they're very approachable stuff. I really liked the way that they went about that. And I always I really enjoyed racing against them in the last few years, because they were doubling up in the 8 as well in 2019. So I think that women's Kiwi 8 was always really, really friendly, and I loved kind of racing against them as well. So yeah, I don't know. I respect everyone, and I think there's so many amazing people, but I think I like the ones that are doing amazing things, but then they are not kind of too cool or too arrogant, and are approachable and good role models I always look up to.
Love that. Fantastic answer.
Amazing.
What are some of your rowing anthems? Just quickly, is there like a song that stands out? Yeah, that's like anything that stands out.
Yeah, so music is something I love, but like my race song before Tokyo was like "In the Shadows" by Lovebirds. It's a great song. Gosh, I had like a whole couple playlists and everything like that, but just
not dusted them off for a while.
Yeah, I don't think I feel that intensity, but that was one that I always listened to.
We're gonna put it on in the car on the way back.
Yeah, it's like I don't know, the rhythm of it, and I think it like builds like throughout and stuff. It's like 6 or 7 minutes, but that was like the song that I would always listen to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then, are you more of a Tupac or Biggie fan? You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah. Respect them both, but I think, yeah. I love it when you call me Big Papa.
So good. Rosie, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been so fun chatting to you, getting to hear your story. I'm sitting here getting inspired. Like you have so many amazing takes, and before your MBA is over, we'd love to have you on the podcast again, and
be great.
We'll talk about getting you on the panel with Tim Foster as well.
Thank you. Thanks so much, guys. It's been super fun.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thanks. Hopefully we can do it again. But yeah, I know there's so much of what you talked about that's going to resonate with people, and it's amazing to be able to sort of bring your story to some people. So yeah, I think that's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks guys. Appreciate it.
That concludes everything for this episode. So on that note, easy there.
Cue the music.